I don't know about you, but I've had just enough of this Minnesota Twins team toying with our emotions. Hello and welcome to the Twinkie Town Tavern, where the beer is cold, the Twins talk is hot, and the stools are always open. I'm your host, Josh Kolojeski, inviting you to grab a drink, pull up a chair, and let's talk about the Twins getting swept by the San Diego Padres. Here's how it happened. Connor Prelips gets off to a slow start in Game 1, giving up a 2-run home run to Ty France in the bottom of the first, but he did settle in from there, at least for the next 3 innings. Minnesota tied the game at 2 with a Cody Clemens 2-run triple in the top of the 4th, but San Diego struck back in the 5th. It was a death by 1,000 paper cuts with weak hit after weak hit sneaking into the outfield, and when the dust had cleared, the Padres added 4 more runs to take the lead for good. The Twins' bats go silent the rest of the way. They managed just 2 hits total during this game. It's a 6-2 loss. In Game 2, the Twins looked to have better fortunes early in the contest, with Luke Keeschel leading off the game with a solo shot. Then Brooks Lee and Kalen Culpepper went back-to-back in the second. San Diego gets one back with the Jackson Merrill bomb off Dean Kramer, but the Twins respond with a Cody Clemens RBI single in the next half inning, and Keeschel tacks on with an RBI single in the 4th. Kramer gives up one more run in the bottom of the 6th on a Merrill single, but exits in line for the win. However, Andrew Morris loses it from there. Jake Cronenworth doubles in a pair of runs, and then Kalen Culpepper inexplicably throws the ball to third on a ground ball to short without Brooks Lee on the bag. That ball gets away, and Cronenworth rounds third to get home and tie the game. Ty France then gets revenge on his old team with an RBI single to cap off a 7th inning collapse. Padres add one more in the bottom of the 8th on Fernando Tatis Jr.'s single, and Minnesota loses 7-5. Finally, in the finale, Bailey Ober pitches well outside of a solo home run given up to Tatis. Lee homers in the 5th to tie the game at 1, but the Padres put up another 4-run frame. This time it's in the 6th. Tatis and Luis Rengifo, both with a pair of RBI base hits off both Cody Funderburk and Jeff Hoffman. Jackson Merrill homers, and Xander Bogaerts hits an RBI double in the bottom of the 7th. Tatis adds another homer in the bottom of the 8th as the Twins get crushed by the score of 8-1. Let's get into it. Thank you for joining us here on the Twinkie Town Tavern. We are a part of the Grey Duck Sports Network. Go ahead and give us a follow on YouTube and Twitter. We are at Grey Duck Sports, and on TikTok at grey.duck.sports. Comment, like, subscribe, all of those good old things. If you want to see more of these podcasts, as well as the others on the Grey Duck Sports Network, and the series of shorts that we work on all throughout the calendar year. Your Minnesota Twins are ridiculous. They are currently 2 games out of a playoff spot in the AL wildcard race. They are in 3rd place in the AL Central, still now leading Detroit, but Cleveland all of a sudden has snuck back into it, and Cleveland is actually one of the teams that we're trailing, and we're 5.5 games back of the Chicago White Sox. And it has been this pulling back and forth all throughout the season, where you can't get too high, you can't get too low. It reminds me of 2009, if I'm being quite honest. We didn't go on a run in 2009 until later on in the season. It didn't seem like there were any 4-game winning streaks or 4-game losing streaks. It was just a pretty solid, even level season that was frustrating because the expectations at the time were so high. I would say a little bit less frustrating this time because our expectations coming into the season were fairly low, at least for most of the Twins fan base. But still frustrating nonetheless, because this team is Jekyll one day and Hyde the next, and they refuse to show us who their true identity is. And even in the ways in which they win and lose, they are Jekyll and Hyde. Sometimes it's a big load of offense, and your offense is hot for a month. Sometimes it's the bullpen is carrying your team, like against the Atlanta Braves. And then sometimes, in this series, I thought the starting pitching was the number one thing for Minnesota. I thought even Connor Prelips, who gave up 6 runs, and I think all of them were earned because of that 4-run 6th, but outside of the 2-run home run to Ty France, thank you, Ty France, for never doing that here, but doing that in San Diego, by the way. Other than that 2-run home run, everything was light contact. Fernando Tatis or I should say, because Fernando Tatis did an excellent job hitting, either light contact or just an excellent approach at the plate, because there were sinkers that Connor Prelip was putting in the right spot, down in the zone, below the zone, and Tatis, in particular during that 4-run inning, is able to get his bat head on it and just take it the other way. There's nothing you can do as a pitcher when you locate and execute your pitches as well as Connor Prelip was doing, and the hitter just wins. Sometimes you just got to tip your cap, and I think that was the case for Connor Prelip. They were able to just abuse his pitches, even if they were well placed, even if they were overall pretty good. The sinker, for whatever reason, was getting hit all around. And it wasn't getting hit hard, but it was getting hit into a place where you could find a hole. And the Twins, of course, have been the beneficiary of this many times during the course of the season. So it's silly to complain about, because there's really nothing worth complaining. That's how baseball goes. Sometimes you just hit them where they ain't, as Yogi Berra, I think, said. And that's what the Padres were able to do. Sometimes you make a good pitch in baseball, and the other team puts a better swing on it. That's what they were able to do against Connor Prelip. And then Dean Kramer, very good game, 5 1/3 innings. Bailey Ober, exactly what you'd want from him. 5 innings, only 1 run. That is kind of on the plus side of possible outcomes for Ober. So overall, I think the starting pitching finally was pretty good, but then the bullpen blows up, and then the offense only gets 2 hits and can't get guys in with the bases loaded or with runners in scoring position throughout most of this series. The Twins scored just 7 runs in this series and still had a chance of winning one of these games, and were at least tied, not at 0, but at a different, I mean, they all are tied at 0 at some point, but the Twins tied the game in all of the games at the very least. The pitching was not the problem. It was the hitting, it was the bullpen. And you do have to get, I think, a little bit worried, maybe, about Jeff Hoffman, who hasn't been super sharp since coming over from Toronto. I still think you give him the benefit of the doubt. This is a guy that has been just nails over the last 3 seasons. I think the strikeout rate is still there. I think the stuff is still there. I just think we're getting poor results early on, but he gives up 2 runs in that 8-1 loss on Sunday. Cody Funderburk has had a couple of back-to-back bad appearances after going a month and a half without giving up a run. So sometimes that just happens. But it still contributes to the frustration that we are feeling right now as Minnesota Twins fans as we try to make a playoff push. And I'm not going to get too disappointed if this team doesn't end up making the playoffs when all is said and done, because of the expectations that we had for it. Everything right now is playing with house money. I just wanted us to not be completely uncompetitive in the final 2 months of the season like we were last year when we traded the farm. I didn't want us to trade the farm again. I didn't want Joe Ryan out the door. I didn't want Pablo Lopez out the door. I didn't want all of those guys gone and Ryan Jeffers gone. Trevor Larnach maybe, but I just wanted them to be competitive enough where they didn't feel the need to sell all those parts away. And we've gotten past that point. But now, for the final 2 months of the season, it's been a focus on making it to the playoffs. And pretty much every single AL team that isn't in a division lead right now has held an AL wildcard spot, it seems like, at some point during the last 2 weeks. We've had Baltimore, Toronto, we've had Cleveland, we've had pretty much and obviously Boston and New York pretty much locked into wildcard spots number 1 and 2. So we are still right in the thick of it, still 2 games back, and yet series like this kind of puts you in a piss poor mood. And that's where I am currently as we wait for this next series to start against the Athletics, part of this West Coast road trip. And the sad thing is we could get swept by the Athletics and we would not be able to declare the season dead just yet. Because we have a series right after the Athletics, a run right after the Athletics that goes White Sox, Tigers, Guardians. 15 games, all within the division, all within against teams who we are vying for either the top of the AL Central with or that final AL wildcard spot in the case of both Cleveland and Detroit. And then you're done with the AL Central schedule, so you don't control anything past that. But that big 15-game stretch is going to be so decisive as to what happens the rest of the way that this past series against the Padres and this next series against the Athletics almost don't matter to really any extent outside of trying to, give yourself more of a margin for error if you do poorly during that 15-game series. I think if you do poorly, you're probably out of it. If you stay around 500, go 7-8, 8-7, then I guess this Athletics series becomes a little bit more pivotal, but so do the rest of the games the rest of the way. And obviously it depends on who you're winning those games against. If you win all 6 against Chicago, all of a sudden you're in first place in the AL Central and have the number 2 seed in the American League and get to skip right over the wild card round and into the divisional round. But the Minnesota Twins, for all intents and purposes, their season is very much still alive because of those factors. And I do want to talk about one more thing from this series before we get into more of the long-term, season-long, rest of the season kind of outlook for Minnesota. And one of the key things that happened in the game in which the Minnesota Twins had a pretty good stranglehold on, they were leading 5-1, and they lose 7-5 in just ridiculous fashion. Something that should not happen, but does to every team at the major league level. When you're up 5-1, you should not lose those games. Sometimes you do. But you still have to find the faults, and the faults would lie at the hands of 3 young players. That would be Andrew Morris, the reliever, Kalen Culpepper, the shortstop, and Brooks Lee, the third baseman. And maybe you can absolve one of Culpepper or Lee from blame there. I wasn't able to see whatever the, all 9, the all 22 equivalent for the baseball diamond, to see exactly where Brooks Lee was when Kalen Culpepper fielded that ground ball in the inning in which San Diego came back to take the lead. But he wasn't where he was supposed to be when all was said and done. Andrew Morris gives up a ton of hits. Not something we can have in that situation. He's looked on to be one of these A-team relievers that you bring in during the clutch situations. Yohandris Gomez, Andrew Morris, A.J. Minter, Jeff Hoffman. To a lesser extent, Tommy Nance and Cody Funderburk at times. But those guys and Travis Adams are probably more your BC team relievers, along with Taylor Rogers. But in this instance, Andrew Morris proved unworthy, for one game at least, of having that A-team sort of role. He gives up 4 runs. Granted, 3 of them are unearned, but still was allowing enough contact to give San Diego the chance to get back into the game in front of their raucous home crowd, which might be one of the best home field advantages in all of baseball, with how loud and how crazy and chaotic that stadium can become. But you can't let that energy start to creep in by walking guys and by not getting weak contact. Because once that starts to build a little bit, then, especially as a younger player, I think that pressure is going to fall on your shoulders just a little bit more. And I know that's a very abstract way of thinking about the game, but I think there is a little something to it. The pressure mounts, you make more mistakes, you miss your spots a little bit more, and then you have an inning like you had. So the rookie reliever crumbles under the pressure. Kalen Culpepper has a ground ball come to him at short. There's 1 out at this point. There's a runner on second. The Twins have a 1-run lead. Get the out at first. There is no reason to turn and throw to third. You can get a guaranteed out over at first. We saw Kalen Culpepper's arm on display this weekend. It was incredible. He had a ton of backhanded stops in the hole where he had to set his feet and fire, and he fired a dart. We haven't seen that sort of shortstop arm since Carlos Correa. It's probably not quite at the Carlos Correa level, but it's close. And I really like what I see from Kalen Culpepper as a fielder overall. I think he can play that position. I think he will eventually, once Merrick Houston ever gets up here in a year or two, He'll probably give way to Merrick Houston, who's known for his glove at the position. But I still think he is a plus defender even until Merrick Houston comes up. I think he's more than just a placeholder shortstop like Jorge Polanco was while we waited for Royce Lewis, who was also supposed to be a good fielding shortstop for what it's worth and is now over at first base. But all that aside, Kalen Culpepper, you need to throw the ball to first in that situation. In his mind, here's how it works. You get the out at third. Okay, there's a runner on first, and you have a little bit more margin of error for a base hit. But there's no payoff really there. If you give up a hit, if Andrew Morris gives up a hit after getting the out at first base, that runner is going to score from second or third no matter what. It doesn't really matter if he moves up from second to third or not, or if he just stays right there. There's no reason to try and get the lead runner. That is a rookie mistake that must be amended, and I'm sure will be amended, and probably already has been discussed between Derek Shelton and Kalen Culpepper. You cannot make that play in that situation, and yet it was still there for them. Brooks Lee, I'm not sure if he was just so far off the bag and Kalen Culpepper didn't see him, or if Brooks Lee got a late break to the bag and didn't think Culpepper was throwing that way. For whatever reason, Brooks Lee was so far off the bag. The throw went right to the bag. The throw probably would have gotten Jake Cronenworth if Brooks Lee had been there. But again, I don't know if Kalen Culpepper even checked to see if his third baseman was there. And if he wasn't, then obviously the choice is to just pivot and go to first at that point. Probably should have been the choice all around, but that's Brooks Lee, perhaps a young player crumbling under pressure. That's Kalen Culpepper now crumbling under pressure, and that's Andrew Morris now crumbling under pressure. So 3 young players, you might think, okay, maybe we are right to hold off on bringing up some of these young prospects. And I would say absolutely not. These young players have still brought far more good to this Twins team than bad. It just so happens that in one game, all the bad kind of compacted together and became enlarged because of how disastrous that loss against San Diego was. But again, I mentioned it. Kalen Culpepper, so many good plays in the hole at shortstop that you'd rather have him up here than Ryan Kreidler. And Ryan Kreidler's on the bench, but home runs from Culpepper. Andrew Morris throughout the year has been an excellent setup guy. Brooks Lee hit a pair of home runs. He's one of 3 Twins now with 20-plus home runs on the season. Something that he wasn't necessarily known for when the Twins made the decision to select him with their draft pick. He's become a decent power hitter. A switch-hitting power hitter that still is struggling with contact, but if he ever gets that down, which was one of his greatest tools coming out of college, then you're in a much better position. You'll take that bad that shows its head every once in a while for the overabundance of good that you're getting. Sure, Ryan Kreidler maybe makes the smart veteran decision, or Tristan Gray in that situation. But Ryan Kreidler and Tristan Gray, had they replaced Kalen Culpepper throughout the entirety of the time from when Culpepper was first brought up until now, if you just replace one of those guys with Kalen Culpepper, or replace Kalen Culpepper with one of those guys in all of those appearances that he's made since coming up, I think by and large you're a worse off team, and you've probably lost more games than you've won at that point. And you might not even be in a position to make that play or even have that play be a possibility in the first place to make the smart play. So no, this does not get me off of my pedestal of calling for Twins prospects, the good young ones that are in AAA raking at that level, to be called up and be a part of this pennant race before we get past the point of no return, which is when the 40-man roster, you have to be on the 40-man roster. Some of the guys already are, so it doesn't really matter if they get up to the major leagues before that point. But in Walker Jenkins' case, he is not on the 40-man. So if he doesn't get on the 40-man before the beginning of September, then he cannot be eligible for the postseason roster. And for whatever reason, the Minnesota Twins front office is sitting on their hands and letting Alex Jackson take up a roster spot without an appearance, are letting Ryan Kreidler decompose on the bench, are letting Alan Roden and Trevor Larnach and all of these guys struggle throughout the season. Byron Buxton playing through injury, a lot of that can be amended if you just bring up Walker Jenkins. And again, much like we've seen from Culpepper, Brooksley, and Andrew Morris, the good is going to outweigh any of the things that you lose when you account solely for veteran presence and experience at the major league level and savvy baseball, MLB baseball knowledge of what to do in every single situation. The flashes that those guys will show will outweigh the savvy that these veterans have. These veterans that have nothing but savvy in many cases and don't have a strong skill at the plate or on the mound. Let Walker Jenkins be the fourth. Sure, he'll stumble at times. Sure, he will make mistakes. He'll strike out with the bases loaded at some point. But get him up here. He deserves to be in the pennant race. Over the last month of the season, Walker Jenkins down in St. Paul is hitting .415 with a .493 on base percentage and an .800 slugging percentage, 7 home runs, and 12 RBI since the beginning of August. He has 3 multi-home run games. He is doing this all at the highest possible level of the minor league totem pole. There is nothing else he can accomplish, and he is wasting that talent right now at AAA. He makes this lineup so much different. And yes, you have to assume that he's going to hit well here, but I have no reason to think he won't, and I fully believe that he has a fantastic swing. He has a Joe Mauer-like swing with some extra power. Get him up here, and this Twins team should be a locked-on favorite for that final AL wildcard spot. We need them here. We need Walker Jenkins here before the end of this athletic series for the start of this pivotal 15-game stretch so that Byron Buxton can get some rest days and be at as close to 100% on the times when he is taking the field so that Alan Roden doesn't have to be in our lineup every single day. So that Alex Jackson doesn't have to be on the active roster for no reason other than to be a seat filler. The bench depth is hurt because Alex Jackson is not trusted by the team, the managers and the coaches to come up in big situations, but somehow is trusted by the front office to be on the major league team despite the coaching staff's mistrust of him, seemingly. Seems like an easy call to make. And it should have been an easy call when Austin Martin was injured. Hell, it should have been an easy call probably well before that. And yet this front office continues to be stubborn. Maybe they're seeing something that we don't see. Maybe they're seeing something in the swing that major league pitchers are going to take advantage of, and whatever. Just give them the chance. It can't be much worse than Alan Roden. It can't be much worse than second half Ryan Kreidler. Get him up here now. All right, some house cleaning for the Minnesota Twins roster. Joe Ryan threw a bullpen over the weekend in San Diego. He threw a 35-pitch bullpen. No word onto how he felt after that bullpen, but he's going to be a key member that I would hope that sometime during this big 15-game stretch, late August, early September, that we get a couple of Joe Ryan starts. Because Connor Prelip coming up on his innings limit. I guess I don't know specifically what it is, but I had heard 120 to 125. He's not going to be in the rotation for very long, I don't think. Zebby Matthews has had some good starts, but mostly bad starts. You want a guy that can anchor down that top rotation spot during these pivotal games, and right now we don't have it. Dean Kramer isn't it. Taj Bradley is as close to it as we have, but you still get some butt-clenching feelings whenever Taj Bradley starts out a game because you're not sure if you're going to get the Taj Bradley who has no control of his fastball and splitter that day. And more often than not, those days this year have been much, much fewer and far between than they have in the past of Taj Bradley's career. But still, that weighs in your back of your mind because you've still seen those blow-ups this season. Joe Ryan, hopefully his rehab process can become accelerated so that he is ready to hit the rotation at some point during that pivotal 15-game stretch, again with games, 6 of them against Detroit, 6 of them against Chicago, and 3 of them against Cleveland, all within your AL Central division, and then you're done with the Central from there on out. Again, it's not an arm injury. It is a leg injury. It's been kind of a bizarre sort of injury. We haven't heard a whole lot about it. So hopefully he doesn't need a whole lot of time to get ramped up. Maybe a rehab start or 2. That would be ideal. Or maybe they just let him do his rehab start at the major league level and not waste any time at the minor leagues, because we are reaching a very critical point in this season. And if we don't have our top weapons available to us, we are going to be seriously outgunned in these games against Chicago, Detroit, and Cleveland. And then you're just depending on, again, if Walker Jenkins isn't there, a lot of these veteran savvy players to have their savviness carry them instead of their actual baseball skill. And I think if you rely on that too often, eventually you're going to be disappointed, and it would be the worst time to become disappointed during that 15-game stretch, and which will decide this Minnesota Twins season for better or for worse. And nothing from 2026 left to talk about on this show, but an update for the 2027 season, and that is that Pablo Lopez began the first step, as the Twins call it, in a very long rehab process in his rehab as he recovers from the Tommy John surgery that he had in February. After his first bullpen session of the spring, he feels something in his elbow, has to have ligament replacement because his UCL is torn. Second Tommy John that he's had in his career, and just on, I believe it was Friday, he starts throwing from about 30 to 45 feet. So nothing like obviously imminent, but it does start the clock a little bit quicker for his return in the 2027 season. The quicker that he is able to start throwing and doing so without any discomfort, the better. Because if you can get Pablo Lopez back for spring training in 2027, even if it's late spring training, and have him ready to be on your opening day roster, you have a rotation that then features Ryan, Lopez, Bradley, Kramer, that should be able to get the job done for you through most of the season. And I guess Bailey Ober is a free agent. So the good news is that even if 2026 doesn't go to plan, the Twins should be at least considered one of the favorites in the AL Central, should health and everything, that obviously is a major caveat for the 2027 season. That is something that we can look forward to, even if this 15-game stretch that is coming up brings dark days ahead, which I'm not certain that it will, but it's nice to have a backup plan for your happiness in place there, and not have that backup plan to be dependent on Kyler Murray and the Minnesota Vikings for 17 games to tide you over until 2027 in the Major League Baseball season that follows in 2027. Well, the Minnesota Twins start a series against the Athletics in Sacramento, California. And that starts tonight with Zebby Matthews going for your Minnesota Twins, 7-8 with a 5.12 ERA, 81 strikeouts this season. Meanwhile, the A's go to Jeffrey Springs. The Twins faced him earlier this year and hit pretty well off of him when the two teams met in Minnesota. Springs has not been much better since then. He is 3-11 with a 6.02 ERA and 89 strikeouts, this season. So not great numbers for either of these two pitchers. For what it's worth, Zebby Matthews is coming off of a bit better of a performance than Jeffrey Springs, so maybe that is enough to give him some momentum heading into a not pivotal series, but a series that you'd expect the Twins, if they are even at their most average, you'd expect them to win 2 of 3, and it would be considered a disappointment if they are not able to do that. That game is going to start at 8:40 p.m. Central Time, so a late one. Get some coffee, get some caffeine, whatever it is, and stay up and watch your Minnesota Twins hopefully beat the Athletics. I believe Trevor Plouffe is joining Corey Provis for the call on that one, if I am not mistaken. So should be a fun little broadcast. And that is the last call for Twins Talk tonight. Thanks for pulling up a stool and joining the conversation at the Twinkie Town Tavern. We'll see you back here after the next one. Go Twins!